Please join me in the responsive reading printed in today's order of service. Helping, fixing, and serving represent three different ways of seeing life. When you fix, you see life as broken. Fixing and helping may be the work of the ego. Good morning. Welcome to Fountain Street Church. My name is Jenny Kinney, and since September, I have been serving Fountain Street Church as Volunteer Ministries Coordinator. Today is a joyous and hard day for me here. It is a joyous day because it's Celebration Sunday, which means that I get to celebrate the many volunteers who have contributed countless hours to Fountain Street Church and our wider local, national, and global communities. It is a hard day for me because it is my last official day as a member of the Fountain Street Church staff. I have accepted another position with Planned Parenthood, and while I have received nothing but support and encouragement from everyone here, I am still very sad to leave. When I started at Fountain Street, I was more than a little bit intimidated. I remember feeling overwhelmed by the size of the Sunday services and how thankful I was when I found a friendly face in the social hall. Everyone seemed so smart and worldly and interesting, and I wasn't confident that I would fit in. But as I stand here today, I feel that I am home. I belong here. I have only been a part of the Fountain Street community for 9 months, which means in the average Fountain Streeter's eyes, I am still very, very young. And while it has only been a short time, Fountain Street has built me up as an employee and as a person. As a member of the Fountain Street staff, I have been pushed outside of my own walls. The outstanding staff here has taught me so much. They have taught me that trying and failing is far better than never taking a risk. They've taught me how to stretch my resources to their limits, how to create potential where most people would only see blank space. Most importantly, they have taken my ideas seriously and encouraged even my most challenging of hopes. Whether I wanted to rework membership or start a young adult circle, my coworkers responded with the three most exciting and terrifying of words: go for it. So thank you to all of my colleagues for supporting me and teaching me how to be an innovative employee. With all that I have learned about being a professional, Fountain Street may have taught me even more about being a human being. I did not go a single day on the job here without witnessing an act of service. Fountain Street volunteers have taught me more about community and taking care of others than I could ever express in this short time. I am a firm believer that volunteers do the world's most important work, and here at Fountain Street there is no shortage of work being done. Everywhere I go, I see Fountain Streeters fighting for justice from all angles. I see our ministers bringing us to tears as they speak from this pulpit about marriage equality and immigration. I see befrienders quietly sitting with people as they reach the end of their lives. I see artists putting their hearts on display, their hopes for a better world. I see teachers spending their mornings off, showing our younger generations ways to be critical and passionate. I then see those young people going and creating space for other young people who may not feel comfortable in their own communities. I see people behind the scenes who are protecting our history. I see musicians and singers who spend their time creating love and meaning through their talent. I see many circles of people taking the time to talk about the issues that face their community and acting on them. I see all of us, so diverse, sitting in this one space, trying to figure out how to free minds, grow souls, and change the world. I see all of these things and hundreds of others. So I want to thank all of you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for welcoming me into this community and making me a part of Fountain Street Church. I am so glad that I found a home here. And I hope that all of us, the next time we see a new face in the social hall, will reach out a hand and share our experience, because I know that there are so many people out there who need a home just like this one. Thank you.
We are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, marching. We are marching, marching. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching. We are marching, marching. We are marching in the light of God. We are singing 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 in the light of God. We are singing, singing. We are singing, singing. We are singing in the light of God. We are singing, singing. We are singing, singing. We are singing in the light of God. Sia Habakkuk again cuencos. Sia Habakkuk again cuencos. Sia Habakkuk again cuencos. Sia Habakkuk again cuencos. Sia Hamba, Hamba, Sia Hamba, Hamba, Sia Habakkuk again cuencos. Sia Hamba, Hamba, Sia Hamba, Hamba, Sia Habakkuk again cuencos.
Good morning. I'll try that again. Good morning. It is good to be among one another this morning. We have a report of sorts for you that I'm told is a habit here at Fountain Street Church on Celebration Sunday to lift up the many volunteer ministries of this place, of this community, both within and beyond these walls. And over the course of a program year, there's a lot of tracking going on of hours and time given freely to the ministries of this place. And so we're going to share not all, but some of those numbers that we've gathered. So Fred Wooden and Jenny Kinney and Lydia Stubbs and Marilyn, please come and join me.
A lot of heart and soul goes into the countless hours that volunteers give to Fountain Street Church to make this a vibrant place. Here are just some of the teams, committees, projects, and programs that wouldn't happen without you. The Properties Committee, Archives, the Choice Fund, Religious Services Committee, Women's Association, Social Action Committee, Office Volunteers, the Duncan Little Fair Great Speakers Series, and this name's just a few. There are so many more.
Over 630 hours were spent in the Character School on Sundays by volunteers. Last September, children and adults went apple picking, and they collected 250 pounds of apples. During December, the children filled and wrapped 243 shoe boxes for Family Promise, and the kids made 22 dog bandanas, 52 dog pole toys, and 48 cat toys for Reverence for Life Sunday.
The governing board members contributed over 1,000 hours of volunteer time. This does not include the significant contribution of several non-board members who served on the nominating and oversight committees. The districts hosted over 30 events, including this afternoon's all-church picnic, and district leaders alone contributed upwards of 1,000 volunteer hours.
There are a total of 28 Sunday morning greeters. Over 200 hours were devoted to welcoming new members and visitors to our church on Sunday mornings. The most commonly asked question, where is the men's room? Our Tower Club class of 7th and 8th graders each participated in 18 hours of Safer Choices programming with Planned Parenthood educators during January and February. 13 seniors in Fountain Club are graduating this year, and a group of 26 Fountain Club youth and adult leaders leave on June the 15th for a trip to the Southwest. It will take them 2 days to get there by train.
Including spring planting, summer tidying up, and fall cleanup, the gardeners donated over 104 volunteer hours. 24 volunteers for Family Promise gave 200 hours of their time, and 2 new circle groups facilitated by volunteers started meeting, the Women's Circle and the Young Adult Circle.
Adult choir director Steve Barton has a vast store of knowledge about which numbers represent which sports players. If someone mentions a number for any reason during choir rehearsal, he immediately calls out what player the number belongs to. I'm testing that later. FSC's handbells spent 3 months at the Bell Spa in Petoskey last winter, being completely restored. Over 30 Fountain Streeters generously contributed to the cost of the restoration. The 10 adult choir members who have been with the choir for the longest have sung for a total of 336 years with the Fountain Street Adult Choir.
Dude.
Yeah, seriously.
That's 300 of them right there.
One of the vocal groups at the Christmas Eve service got its pitch from an iPhone pitch pipe. Including guest choirs, over 200 musical guests have participated in the worship music here at Fountain Street during the past year. If you include concerts we hosted in our space, over 300 musical guests participated during the past year.
The Art Committee is the conservator of art at Fountain Street Church and is responsible for staging art exhibits, maintaining art in the church, serving as a screening body for art purchases, acquisitions and gifts to the church, designing and financing the Holiday Order of Services covers, and managing other special projects to enlighten the spirits of our diverse congregation and the West Michigan community. During the 2013-2014 church year, the Art Committee has staged 5 art exhibits in the Keeler Gallery and elsewhere, including the FSC venue for Art Prize 2013. And our venue had over 25,000 visitors. This was all organized, planned, and managed by FSC's Art Prize Task Force.
Connection Group facilitators volunteered over 90 hours to prepare and facilitate this year's Connection Groups, in which 23 folks participated. The service project included a staff appreciation luncheon and the Access Hunger Walk. Once a month, and often more, a dedicated group volunteers at God's Kitchen, a meal program in the Hartside neighborhood. The Befrienders, a group that visits with people and provides a listening presence, volunteered over 698 hours, including meeting with their befriendees and participating in meaning-making reflections and continuing education.
Wow. So you see the scroll, some of these are groups, some of them are events, and that's not everything. It's important when you think about it to remember that the church is not 11 to 12 on Sunday. It's 24/7. And that it's not just in the building, it's in homes and communities. Most of the ministry of this church is not what we staff do, it's what you do. And most of the religious life we practice is not what we do here, but what you do there. You reminded me through your childhood of a saying the Quakers used, very similar to the one you read, that at the exit of a Quaker meeting house, there is often a sign that says, "The worship being over, the service begins." Our work is not just here, it's everywhere. But we did do some numbers. The estimate of volunteer hours is over, 5,006.75 hours that we could count. It doesn't count those who did it without letting us know. There are so many more.
For our readings today, I have some poetry, a top 10 list of sorts, and a bit of a quotation. The first may sound familiar. It is by Robert Frost. But yield who will to their separation, My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation. As my two eyes make one in sight, only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortals' sake. Is the deed ever really done for heaven and the future's sakes? Robert Frost. Words from one time, one voice, one place, perhaps also for this time, this place for us. The next reading is a list of 10 signs of call. And it is a list by a woman named Elizabeth O'Connor. She was a lay member of Church of the Savior in Washington, D.C., an independent, ecumenical, unique Christian community that arose, I believe, in the late 40s, still around today in various incarnations in the Adams-Morgan district of D.C. and beyond. Number one, signs of a call. It is good news. It is not an ought, it stirs and excites. 2, there is a sense of mystery and awe. 3, it is part of who we are meant to be. 4, it seems impossible. We are inadequate, and our false self offers lots of reasons not to do it. 5, it is persistent. 6, it is risky. We must be willing to fail. We are called to be faithful, not successful. 7, it is simply stated, focused within a larger need. 8, it is countercultural. It does not make sense in terms of our culture. 9, it is evolutionary. It will change. It is crucial to let go of the old to make way for the new. And 10, it is costly. The promise is greater than the cost, and it is also costly not to answer the call to refuse who you are meant to be. Elizabeth O'Connor. Words from one voice, words for our ears. And one more. By a professor of Jewish studies, David Ariel. Each human being has a vocation in life and a specific and unique calling. A Hasidic teacher said that the world needs each and every human being because every person has the mission to make something perfect in this world. That mission is unique to the individual who must fulfill his or her own personal destiny. Before his death, Rabbi Zuzah of Hannipol said, "In the next world, they will not ask me, 'Why were you not Moses?' They will ask me, 'Why were you not Zuzah?'" Enter for worship, depart for service. These were the two statements that were printed at the top of the inside cover of the bulletin of the order of service each week of the church where my family spent Sunday mornings during my growing years. Enter for worship, depart for service. No matter where I might have been worshiping or what type of service I was engaged in during the week, these words have been etched on my heart. These words have been guideposts along the journey. I share this because it is one of my fundamental understandings of not only what church, big church, is about, but certainly what a Sunday called Celebration Sunday at Fountain Street is about. Right? We enter for a time of gathering in, bringing all that we are, all that we carry, both that which is light and that which is heavy. Gather into community, and then we depart for that 24/7 service within and beyond these walls in our daily lives. We've heard some of this lifted up already this morning. More than a handful of you will go to God's Kitchen tomorrow. There are district leaders and volunteers currently over at the park setting up for this afternoon's picnic. There were ushers volunteering at the memorial service here on Friday. Office volunteers helped log all the names and hours so many of you tracked over the year. Another dear volunteer copied and folded the order of service in your hands. There are character school volunteers on the second floor right now creating art with the youngest among us. Fountain Club adult leaders will meet tomorrow evening in their final preparation for the service learning trip to Arizona. On Wednesday, as Fred mentioned, a group will stand outside at Rosa Parks Circle, once again advocating for marital justice. And we know that's just a mere slice of the pie in a few short days' time. And just some of the more visible ways that Fountain Streeters are engaged in service, both within, across, and beyond the community. And poignantly and often, privately, there are the many among us being of service by dropping off a meal for someone else, taking a slow and steady walk with someone nearing the end of their days, or giving a hug to someone in the midst of a long season of grieving or a fresh morning of one. These are often the hours that are not logged. When we are engaged in living a life that includes service, we know that all that is given freely can't only be measured in hours or even dollars or even in some simple equation of what it all adds up to, what its cumulative value really is. We know that these acts of service are hard to measure, hard to quantify. And yes, the numbers are important, always important, and are one of the ways we measure our days, measure what we know is of value. I can't help but to then ask the next question: how do we allow not only for celebration of the numbers, but also have some awe in the numinous? The numinous being that which surpasses understanding, that has a spiritual quality. For some of us, that is a presence of divinity, and if not that, it is some inner nudge that allows what feels like separate parts of our being to feel some greater sense of unity. There were some other words on the Sunday morning bulletin of the church of my growing years that have also stayed with me. On the back of the Sunday morning order of service, where there is the listing of all the staff and the clergy, there, listed first, was and still is, I checked, ministers, all members of the church. Ministers, all members of the church. Basically, their words for what we call the priesthood of all believers, or the ministry of all people. The concept resonated with me at a really early age. I took it seriously. I'm like, okay, we're all ministries, jumping on that bandwagon of priesthood of all believers. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I resisted ordination for years. It literally took one church quite accustomed to calling ministers to say, okay, Elizabeth, get on with it. It's time to finish that process. But I share this not to talk about that story, but because it is a fundamental lens through which I view and experience the volunteer ministries of this place during my first seasons here. We talk here at Fountain Street about living out the mission of being a vibrant community that helps people craft their spiritual journey for creative and responsible action in the world. Now, for several generations of religious leadership, or at least for 2 or 3, there's regular talk and assessment by, the church consultants out there that talk about whether or not a church is pastoral or programmatic, pastor-centered or program-centered, even policy-centered. Policies, pastors, programs do maintain and sustain a structure. But I know, we know that people and passions are what keep a place like this vibrant. That really vibrancy comes from being people-centered and passions-centered. I know some of you are thinking, we know this. But so often, we can get caught up in the details and the day-to-day and need to remind ourselves of our passions and the people with which we express and share our gifts through service and through learning. Service, be it volunteering or not, avocation or vocation, hobby or primary week, is often a calling. I know this concept of calling is not foreign to so many of you and to us. If I counted the number of times that I've heard Fountain Streeters use the word calling unsolicited recently, I wouldn't have enough hands on my fingers. It's also a word replete with religious connotations and history, just as vocation very much was and is. So what's a calling? Where does it come from? Who calls whom? Who gets them? My take is that calling is an equal opportunity employer. Everyone's got one, and many calls. And many of those callings are lived out in the groups on the scroll. In a world where knowledge or facts or information for most of us can just be attained from the click of a button and scrolling down a screen, acquiring wisdom is a much trickier and riskier endeavor. And this is where our capacity to assist one another in this discernment of gifts and callings is all the more important. Some may tell you that synchronicity, right, could be a sign of a call. For some, a call might be an instance of choosing a vocation, whilst to the person called, it might feel like it is not a choice. The vocation chose them. One of my favorite writers, Terry Tempest Williams, who I tend to be in the habit of quoting often, she tells a story in the beginning of one of her books of being 10 years old and with a cousin of hers and a great uncle, and they were at a ladder picking cherries. She had a Mormon background. And so the uncle asked them as they're perching on these sturdy branches and picking cherries, what principle of the gospel means the most to you? Terry Tempest Williams writes that Mormon children are used to these kinds of questions practiced on them by their elders who consider this part of their religious training. And she goes, her cousin replied, pulling a cherry off its stem, obedience is the most important principle. Free agency, I answered, eating one. Obedience, free agency. Choice or destiny, right? There's a tension there and how our life paths unfold and where we think the source might come from. Parker Palmer the wise man oriented in Quaker practice, wrote that he sees vocation as not coming from willfulness. He says it comes from listening, because the word vocation itself is rooted in the Latin for voice. I was struck this week while reading several of the many remembrances of Maya Angelou that, in the words of one journalist, her writing career was a vocation born accidentally over a dinner conversation. Another journalist's description of that story called her writing career a dare at a dinner. I think it was James Baldwin who dared her to write a book, and then someone called up a publisher. Doesn't it feel like she was just offering words for Nelson Mandela? Right? A sun never outlasts its sunset, but will rise again at the dawn. Clearly, her life had a lot to do with voice, with listening, and then a lot of willfulness to use that voice as well. Sometimes, or often, we have to name another's calling for them. Oftentimes, calls can be buried deep, or sometimes the ringer is just off and on mute. Belovedness of all people, a priesthood of all believers, or however one might translate it, a troop of Fountain Streeters. Isn't that so much the premise of what service and learning in which we engage is about? Is it not a great equalizer? Is it not the belovedness of all people why so many of us care about marriage equality? Is it not a sense of the moral agency of each and every person that is a key premise of the reproductive justice movement? Is it not connection rather than separateness that grounds those who work for environmental stewardship? And is it not, right, a wholeness of all our human beings that propels all the movements that work to eliminate the isms that divide us and separate us? No one is any more nor less than anyone else. We do know this. We know this, I think, because it is our true nature as human beings. And it is also part of our nature to forget that a lot. Being human, at least in my experience, is a both and kind of deal. And there is such, right, people call that there's a cult of speed around us, a culture of complaint in the wider world, rules that operate the way folks do things. How do we move from that to a culture of constantly cultivating and calling out one another's passions? Right? From a culture of demands to one of prayerful discernment. How we empower rather than imprison one another. Whether your creative and responsible action in the world is your vocation or your avocation or both or neither, it matters not. Whether you or I speak of service as volunteering, as ministering, as healing, as justice, as living out a calling, whatever words we use, it really, in the grand scheme of things, matters not. Whether the place where your spiritual journey and responsible action in the world meets, whether it feels like all choice or all circumstance, all destiny or all drudgery, a summons of the sacred, or an inner nudge and nod to free will, or some combination. Right? It matters not. What matters is that you have done it, that we do it, are doing it, and will do it. What matters is that you do it and that you know, that we know deep down that it does that it does make a difference, and it does change the world. May it be so, and amen.